Today's program is dedicated to Al-Hajj Marhum Azadbhai Kassam, and today the program would be with Tahsin Azadali Kassam, his son, followed by Marcia, Majlis and Suraya Sin, and then Wazu and Namaz. Please welcome Dr. Tahsin with Nari Salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge in Allah from shaitan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. فَتَبَارَكَ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best creator of all. My eldest brothers, sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, it's an absolute honor and thanks to all of you for hosting this seniors gathering today in loving memory of my father, Azadali Jafferali Kassam, who would have loved this and actually otherwise would have been sat here today as your chairman. My father lived a full life of 72 years and found his purpose in caring for his family, his brothers and sisters, particularly after his parents passed away. Then later being a role model to his children as a loving husband, as well as contributing to wider society through various tabligh, but predominantly focused on volunteering within the community to establish the majalis of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. After my grandfather, Marhum Jafferali Kassam Nattu, passed away in Dar es Salaam in 1962, my father as a young man took charge of the Husseini Society as well as the Mehfil Askari opposite his home in Dar es Salaam, at that time in Libya, Sultan Street. This included organizing Julus procession from Mehfil Askari to Mehfil Abbas and a variety of other roles such as Cub Scout Master at the Chungani grounds. He engaged with well-known personalities including Dr. Aziz Sachedina, whom he said he regarded as a mentor and in fact recently contacted and was due to meet up with. My father was also very fond of Marhum Allama Sayyid Akhtar Rizvi, whom he had asked to be a patron of the Masumin magazine which he was editing. Allama Sayyid Akhtar Rizvi entrusted my father actually to befriend one of the first Shia Ithna Ashari revats at that time, a brother named John. Now, having moved to the UK in 1966, my father actually visited Dar es Salaam in 1975, and Marhum Allama Sayyid Akhtar Rizvi drove him to Bilal Mission's Kibahi village. My father has written an article in tribute to Marhum Allama Sayyid Akhtar Rizvi, which I've uploaded onto a website, azadalikassam.com. On this website, you can also find some of those classic Marthia Noha that my father recited in the early 90s. Please note that with time, I'll be adding some older archived material of photos, particularly the early Hujjat Stanmore days. My father moved to Leicester in 1966, and majalis were being held at the family home every Thursday night. While there were no other Shia Ithna Ashari families in Leicester at that time, there were some other students who would attend, and so my grandmother, Marhuma Rukia Bai Kassam, would prepare biryani, fatiha, and tabarruk. The first Muharram majalis for the then Leicester community was held in 1973 at Marhum Bahadur Bai Khimji's residence. The majalis was heard on pre-recorded tape recited by Marhum Mullah Alauddin Bai Bimji. Typically, families would take turns throughout the year to hold majalis at their homes. In 1974, property on Dan Street was rented by the community for 12 days of Muharram for the purpose of holding majalis. Again, there's a brief history of the first settlers in founding Leicester Jamaat, which started in 1974 with the purchase of 172 Mir Road, where my father later became president of the Jamaat. He'd recite Nohas and Qasidas, run madrasa, and even lead Eid namaz. So again, I've put a small article which he wrote on the website. He also facilitated in the establishment of the first resident alim, Maulana Sayyid Zulqadar Razavi, who my father was honored to accommodate in his own home. In 1984, the Jamaat moved to 127 Loughborough Road, and Masjid al-Hussein, Duxbury Road, opened on 14th January 2007. In the late 80s, we moved to London, I was only a couple of years old at that time. And so for just over the last 30 years, my father has enjoyed Hujjat Stanmore as his community. And it provided a place of solace and rejuvenation for him to continue serving, using that same purpose to overcome other challenges he faced in his life. As most of you may be aware, my father's main role here was as Mukhi alongside Marhum Muhammad Hussain Manik in the 90s, and he continued this throughout the years until today. In later years, he was also formerly the honorary secretary, but also served as wedding registrar, and of course, more recently, vice chair and then later chairman of Hujjat Seniors. But of all, it seems he's remembered most for the marthiyas that he would recite and the dua that he'd remind us all to recite during Ramadan before breaking the fast. Last night, I was looking for a speech my father gave during one of the Zainabiyya days, where in fact he had spoken about death. Now, although I haven't managed to find that, I came across a few other speeches and realized that there was a common theme. My father strongly felt that there was no need for bickering in the community and that the seniors were the best suited demographic to demonstrate how unity should be achieved in the community throughout and wider from there. He would say that brotherhood and unity with khulus is the essential part of our community's growth and development. He used to tell us a story to illustrate that unity requires commitment from everyone. So the story is basically to test the loyalty of citizens. A king made the decree that all his subjects should pour a glass of milk in the night in an empty tank placed in a town center. I can see some of you nodding, so you probably know this story. Yeah. So I think it's possibly due to the fact that milk was more expensive than water. But anyway, in the morning when the king and his associates inspected the tank, it was just full of water. Needless to say, each citizen was thinking that everybody will pour milk into the tank, and therefore if I pour water, it will get diluted and no one will know, and I'm not really going to make a difference. But everybody had done the same thing and poured this glass of water. So the idea here is that commitment from everybody is required to achieve the unity that eventually helps the whole community foster and grow. To encourage inclusivity, therefore, my father would invite youth to attend seniors programs and go to the extra mile to respond to queries he received. And he was interested in fairness for all, such that people with disabilities should not be discouraged to recite, and found other things of vital importance, such as the placement of the seniors' chairs should not be tucked away to the side during salat, such as Jummah salat. He'd say the ladies are the hub of the community, and again, actually wanted to encourage the youth to engage more with the seniors, so that our identity as a community would be protected from generation to generation. So perhaps going forwards, these are some of the items we can consider implementing, inshallah. Salawat. I wanted to share a few points about what my father was actually like at home. So he was a real family man. Throughout his life, he really enjoyed spending time with his family. He'd be happy to run errands, even across the world if he needed to, in order to provide. Meanwhile, he sacrificed everything for himself, opting to wear some of my old clothes because he felt proud in them, while new clothes and gifts are still in his drawers and have been unopened for years. I think this is a typical dad quality, perhaps. By profession, my father worked for over 40 years as an engineer with BT, or British Telecom, and was extremely talented with his hands, particularly in wiring and general DIY, such that he refurbished our entire home, including parts of the exterior structure and the internal wiring, flooring, tiling, you name it. Being under the wings of my father meant I had developed my writing style and knew of methods to solve math equations even before we were taught them at school. As a young boy, I benefited from playing with games and toys that my father crafted with his own hands. This could be as simple as a basketball hoop, a small wrestling ring, or even a model house that was powered using renewable energy. A Scale-X trick set, a boxing bag, a snooker table, or a battery-powered bike were the type of gifts we would expect on our birthdays as children, which my father really enjoyed celebrating. It's more apparent to me now that without my father's physical presence, I feel he has equipped me to tackle life's tasks. At least professionally, I handle new inventions as a patent attorney, and with a PhD in engineering, I've authored several texts. But as Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam says, it is the right of your father that you recognize that these are his traits that he instilled in you. And so these are the traits that he's instilled in me. And I'm only a branch of that tree. And in fact, he is the root of that tree. It was an honor for me to see that a group of some of my childhood friends had set up a Just Giving page to raise funds for building water wells with the Zahra Trust in memory of my father. It was heartfelt because they recall the days when my father would earn vouchers through his workplace to take us all swimming at Watford Springs, where there were slides and water chutes. Even though we lived over 45 minutes away, my parents arranged for my sister and I to attend Al-Sadiq and Al-Zahra school in Willesden Green when it opened. In addition, we'd attend Quran classes in the evenings, Cub Scouts, Saturday workshops, Sunday madrasa, all the camps during the holidays. We even later moved home just to be in the catchment area of one of the best secondary schools, and my father personally tutored us to pass those entrance exams. Our parents really sacrificed everything, their entire lives for us, and it's to them that we're forever indebted. Salawat. Penultimately, I wanted to raise awareness of some of the medical conditions that my father had. So, due to blood clotting, my father suffered from a brain hemorrhage in 2000. A few years later, he was diagnosed with autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, which ultimately caused kidney failure. My father was on hemodialysis for the last 15 years. But despite both of these two conditions, at least, you couldn't tell looking at him that he was disabled or physically impaired in any way. To add some insight, polycystic kidney disease involves cysts growing on the kidneys, impairing their kidney function. And I think my father's kidneys, each of them were at least 30 centimeters in size, 3 times the size of what normal kidneys are, to the point where they end up taking up more space in the body and affecting other organs in the surrounding area. Now, many may not be aware, but that's why my father would opt to stand up to recite Marthia in the later years, rather than sit, as otherwise he'd feel his kidneys were affecting his lungs, and he wanted to recite to the best of his ability. Dialysis requires a machine that draws blood out from the body through a permanent catheter, usually placed either on the chest or on the arm, and filters the water from the blood before re-entering the body. So it emulates the process that the kidneys otherwise do. It doesn't emulate it exactly because sometimes it takes away some of the nutrients from the body, which then you need to replenish through a controlled diet. And also you need to control the amount of water intake you have, because cleansing of the body or the water in the blood only takes place during those dialysis sessions. This meant dedicating 6 hours in total, 3 times a week, attending the renal unit at Watford General Hospital. We were fortunate, actually, to have traveled the world as a family, including ziyarat to Iran, Damascus, Hajj and Umrah, Africa, and parts of Europe. But once my father was on dialysis, this wasn't so easy. This didn't deter him, however, as once he found where the dialysis centers were abroad, he could arrange the dialysis sessions there. So over the years, we traveled to Mombasa several times. He went to Turkey with the senior citizens and arranged his own dialysis sessions there, or attended his own dialysis sessions there. He even went for Hajj with dialysis sessions that were arranged by Hajj tours. Last year in January, we were blessed to travel to Iraq, including Najaf, Karbala, Kadhimain, and Samara, where my father had dialysis arranged by Muhammad Raza Jaffer of Alawi Travel in the hospitals in Najaf and in Karbala. And many may not know, and this is an article also which my father drafted, which I'm going to submit to the National Kidney Foundation magazine. But the hospital, particularly in Karbala, Al-Kafil Hospital, is, I think, the 8th best hospital in the entire Middle East, and is at a better standard than a lot of the European hospitals we have, because it's funded by the Haram of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. In January of this year, we were riding jet skis together in Mombasa, and even went for a weekend road trip in April to Portugal, where we visited a deserted island in Faro and took a speedboat through caves in coastal rock in Lagos. For the last 5 years or so, my father had a severe heart condition, a constricted valve and a leaky valve. His heart condition was so severe that the cardiologists agreed that surgery would only be a deadly option. So surgery wasn't an option. And particularly with no symptoms showing, my father would just be smiling in the jovial mood that he always was. The doctors would simply congratulate him for how he was coping with these medical conditions. We weren't going to stop him. It only made sense for us to encourage him to lead the precious life that he wanted to live with full satisfaction and enjoyment. But I feel my sister's hijama clinic helped him a lot, and my mother's care, which included her own herb and vitamin regimes, such as drinking ground wheatgrass that she grows herself, and in fact has used to shrink her own cancer tumor, has helped him a lot. Ultimately, my father rejuvenated himself by attending mosque. There's no question about it. If Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays were the draining dialysis days, then there was always, in addition to Ramadan, Muharram, and the Wiladats and Wafats, the Wednesday seniors program, the Thursday night Dua Kumail, the Friday Jummah, and the weekend Fajr namaz. And this was his replenishment. This year was the first year that Eid prayer didn't fall on a dialysis day, but otherwise he'd still attend and then rush to the hospital. For the last year, my father and I were planning a holiday to Sicily in response to a dialysis holiday advert we'd seen in the Kidney Life magazine. He spent every dialysis session clipping newspaper ads for our next holiday together. While we planned a holiday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best of planners, planned something different. And after the one day I enjoyed with my mother and father in Italy, we ended up in Ismet Hospital, which actually was a world-class hospital where heart transplants were first performed. My sister, cousins, aunts, and uncles joined us there days later because we began to realize that although my father had overcome every hurdle of the septic shock, which even later included a minor stroke and cardiac arrest, which were all caused by infection of the damaged heart valves I mentioned earlier, it seemed as though his time had arrived to return to Allah because his blood platelets were too few to respire. As my father's blood pressure was dropping, it was already below fatal, but he continued to hang on. And this was until we all played the adhan in both of his ears, and with conviction, each of my mother, sister, wife, and I had recited the dua for when death approaches, which begins, Raditu billahi rabban. It seemed as though it was for our comfort that my father continued to hold on, until he was sure that we were all going to be okay. My father has really set the highest standard of how to overcome trials in this life, because he just smiled all the way through what others would define as suffering or difficulty. I recall once he had collapsed due to blood clotting in his lungs, but once he was discharged from hospital, he learned that the Mukhi team needed a cover. Without failing to disappoint, and despite our advice, he returned to mosque the following week to serve the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. With his determination to enjoy what he would call a precious life, it didn't make sense for us to continue to not encourage or to not support him. In fact, suffering itself is subjective, because although I could say that medically I was healthier, I struggled to wake up for Fajr while my father would be at mosque. So who has the greater output and who is indeed healthier and who is indeed suffering are all subjective concepts. Salawat. To end, I just wanted to leave with some lessons learned in the context of Karbala. We saw my father's soul leave his body, and his presence left the room. Nothing leaves unless it's going somewhere. And we learned the power of the soul because we suddenly felt a detachment from his body. We concluded that a person's presence that is felt and seen is indeed that of their soul. There would be no point in creating a human body with such abilities to spread kindness while the same human being desires to live, for there only to be an abrupt end. It just doesn't make sense, or else why would Allah create the eternal desire as a characteristic of a human? If even a person can produce a drawing and then when it's erased, the person can reproduce that drawing again, why do we doubt that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created before with kun fayakun can't be created again? If the Prophet of Islam himself says in Hadith Thaqalain that he will reunite with the Quran and Ahlul Bayt at the pond of Kawthar, why do we doubt the possibility of meeting them and indeed our own loved ones again? If Allah in the Holy Quran says every soul shall taste death, and Qasim ibn Hassan alayhi salam says that the taste of death is like the taste of honey, then if we are submissive to Allah, why do we fear its taste so much? If the Imam say that death is in fact a gift for the believer, and Imam Ali alayhi salam says, I do not fear death, rather I welcome it, then why do we view death as an opposite to life? How can death be an opposite to life when death is a creation of Allah, and every creation has a purpose, and its doorway to a life greater than the one we've come to know? When we know everything is created for a purpose, and if we serve our purpose well, then death is also created and it will serve its purpose well too. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mean when He says in the Quran, in Surah 6 verse 32, what is the life of this world but play and amusement, but best is the home in the hereafter for those who are righteous, will you not then understand? If death were an end and would be a point, there would be no point in reciting ziyarat or saying salam. Why are we able to recite this salam from anywhere? To reply to salam is wajib. Why is it so difficult to believe that our marhumin are alive and can hear more than we do and see more than we do when we go to Qabristan and we recite salam and they reply? And do not say whoso is killed in the path of Allah is dead. No, indeed they are alive, but you perceive not. Surah Baqarah, verse 154. Elsewhere in the Quran, Allah says, and do not think of those killed in Allah's path as dead. Indeed, they are alive and receive their sustenance from their Lord. They rejoice in the bounty provided by Allah. And here, to die in Allah's way is to be submissive to Him. And that's something we all have the potential to do. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam says, if a person is on the right path, then what difference does it make if death befalls him? How fortunate are we that Allah has chosen to create us, because even that probability is infinitely small, and further to have created us with the potential to live for eternity in Jannatul Firdaus. As a matter of language, why is the most common English condolence sorry for your loss, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Asr, there is no such thing as loss for those who believe and do good deeds and enjoin on each other truth and enjoin on each other patience? Why is it that Imam Hussein alayhi salam says, O Allah, what has he lost, he who loses you? But O Allah, what can he lose, he who finds you? When he says, Hayhat minna dhilla, that humiliation is so far removed from me. And that's why on the day of Ashura, when we say, A'dhamallahu ujurana wa ujurakum bi musabina bil Hussein alayhi salam, we actually send rewards and blessings on each other for bearing this with steadfastness, and with faith and belief in God, the calamity that befell on Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Therefore, overcoming this grief is to realize that although we are separated temporarily, right now, my father is reunited with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, in Jannatul Firdaus, just like all our marhumin, where they're with their parents and with their family who they've missed for so long. In the meantime, we now have to fulfill the purpose of our own lives, because we will follow in his wake very soon, but I'm sure he's happier now where he is than he was on earth. And to end, I'd like to leave you with a phrase that my father would often recite, which kept him smiling at all times. There's no point in crying, because if you cry, you'll cry alone, but if you smile, the whole world will smile with you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.